Today's guest is Brian Stevens, CEO of Neural Magic. We have the opportunity to listen to the leadership of a team that is currently making what we know to be large language models and vision models accessible at an enterprise level that isn't going to require massive infrastructure to have it running. They've optimized CPUs to be able to run these models and to be tailored, fine-tuned, if you will, I think is the correct term, for any enterprise's needs. And this comes directly as a consequence of Brian's time as CTO and developing product over at Google Cloud and Red Hat. So when you add that weight into who's leading the show here and having come across a dear friend of his, Nir, who was a part of the founding team of Neural Magic, right? That was founded at MIT, you start to get a clearer picture for what's going on, if you will, sort of tapping into these open source models and pushing the envelope forward and making it more accessible and ultimately democratizing things. So we cover sort of that journey. We discuss what Neural Magic is trying to accomplish, and then we even go into what people should be looking at in terms of what's needed in the industry as a whole, which is really on the applied side, right? And we even touch on maybe some things people should consider, as there's currently a lot of nerves around like career development for people and where should they go and what should they be studying. And, suffice it to say, Brian says, like, start now. Don't study for 3 years for something and, just dive right into it. So without further ado, Brian Stevens of Neural Magic. The place I'd love to start is as follows, right? You've been able to take what is open source and create a business around that in a way that not only supports the growth of the open source community and its products and services, but also sets free a lot of enterprises and businesses that would otherwise find it prohibitively expensive to be in business. And so you have this background of Google Cloud and Red Hat, which is like, wow. And then we're talking, and so I can pin it here. We're also talking about securing blue chip investment, right? For your current venture with Neural Magic. So I want to sort of wrap my head around this. And I think one way that we can really tap into the magic of that is, what is your earliest memory of working with computers?
Oh my gosh. Definitely back in high school. Not going to tell you my age, but they did have computers. They did have computers back then, barely. But what it was, there wasn't like a dedication around programming as a curriculum. And what it was, but in math, it was highly relevant for programming in support of math classes. So it was just really getting introduced in math class to the point where I just thought it was like recess. It was just the first experience I had on the programming side. It was just the learning. It was just joy, because you found yourself like really quickly creating it to the point where 2 years later, I remember when you had to sit with the guidance counselor and you were making plans. I had already figured out my career plan. My career plan was I was going to be a carpenter. I even knew the kind of vehicle I was going to have with all my carpentry equipment in it, and it was set what color it was. And my guidance counselor said no, and I was like, I was devastated, and I'm like, well, I have zero other interests career-wise. And he's like, well, you really like programming, and I'm like, I just didn't know that could be a career. He was like, and so back in the 80s, like everything was just getting rock and roll in university, and I just ran to it, and it was just such a fun experience, because it wasn't an insular experience even back then. You talk about like open source being collaborative, but even back then, we were kind of programming together. Maybe that's because of lack of computer resources. So you're doing it with your friends, and it was just a blast. It was just a really creative, fun time. The fact that you could have a whole career based on software development, I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought it would have ran its course, and here we are in the world of AI, and I guess it's just as relevant today as it was back then.
No, man, it's insane what's taken place from then, and it's so cool to hear what that was like, because I'm 89 when I was born, and I remember the floppy disks and the hard disks that came shortly after. I remember web TV was around for a while that most people
Yeah.
weren't hip to at the time. That was really my experience. So it really is a shocker to see where we are today. And
Yeah.
before we continue to push forward here, I just want to tap into your days as CTO with Google or Red Hat, either one that you want to tap into here. What was that entrance like for you, knowing that that was where you had decided, wow, this could be a thing, to then working for some of
Yeah.
the biggest names in
Yeah.
tech? What was that experience like for you? And do you find that it's suited you well for your next venture? Because it sounds like when you do things, you do them at a scale of massive change. You're a change maker, just the way that you run things based on where you've been in terms of the notes that I saw. Did you go in knowing that, or is it the proverbial, I had no idea I was going to change the world, I just knew that I wanted
Yeah.
to?
I think I've always had a really good perspective on, like, as you know, like computer software developers often work for companies that are selling stuff. And a lot of software developers are working on a project, but they don't necessarily take an interest or a fascination with what it's for. And I just, even as a really early software developer of, Digital Equipment Corporation in Massachusetts, I didn't want to just work on algorithms. I wanted to kind of know like who was using those and was it gonna mean anything? And so I kind of had this weird, unusual side of a programmer back then, that I was kind of, I guess, part product manager, part program, software developer. But there was kind of this transition. But through that, I was always really empathetic of like our end users, right? And so I never believed in the just throw software at them and then they should thank you and pay you. Right. I always wanted to know, like, well, what's their challenge though? How easy was it for them to use it, deploy it? And so I really spent a lot of time, with customers. So I became a software developer, but I was always very outbound, always meeting with clients, and CTOs often do that as well, right? But I think like the Red Hat thing wasn't. I don't know if it was. I can't give myself credit that it was a vision. I'd call it an observation. That prior to being at Red Hat, I was in the land, like the whole world of enterprise IT was proprietary, really expensive hardware made by Sun and IBM and HP. And then each of us had our own proprietary operating system called Unix, and that ran the world of server IT. Microsoft wasn't there yet. They were on the desktop. And that was the world we're in. And that's all I knew at this 200,000 person company at DEC. And then along in the labs, we started to use more Intel hardware. And we're using it more as a front end to drive load on a database, so we could like build this big backend database that was faster and more capable than anybody else's Oracle database. And I'm looking at these little Intel front ends that were doing this simulated database transactions on it. And every like 6 months, we'd throw them out and buy new ones because they were cheaper. And these were just the desktop PCs back then. And then, and they, of course, the only thing that ran on desktop PCs was Microsoft. And then a little while later, it was like, we could tell Microsoft was too slow. So we replaced it with Linux. And then because Linux was open, we then started making modifications to Linux to make it have multiple concurrent threads to run on this thing. So I'm sitting here in a company that's selling $100,000 computer equipment, servers. And I'm looking at these little PCs from Intel. And like, that's the future. It's like that commoditization is going to drive it. And none of the big vendors are going to get behind it because it's just too disruptive for a company to say, we're not going to sell this $100,000 thing. We're going to sell this open thing that's going to cost a fraction of the cost and be more powerful. And so I just dawned on me, like, only Microsoft was going to win, because to them, entering server IT was an expansion of their business, not a disruption. And HP, IBM, Digital, Sun were never going to embrace open source and Linux and Intel. And so I left and, focused on making Linux enterprise ready, which it was long ways from being enterprise ready, but directionally, right? So it really was just an observation of like, this would be a far better future for end users. And then the rest was really just like making it be so, like executing and hiring great people and being really customer centric and building the technology they need. And building a subscription model, I think, was perhaps the biggest innovation there.
Absolutely.
Because we didn't want a model where like we're giving them licensed software, because what that does is it means engineers are like, the company's dependent on releases coming because that's a revenue event. And if you can get out of that rhythm, and again, it didn't exist back then. If you get out of that rhythm of license being the economic basis of the company, then you start just building things that your customers need, and you care about continuity and compatibility and all of those things that matter. So what if they'd already paid for the next version before they even had it? And then you're just focused on like everything that they need and making it be a non-event and enabling all the things that they don't have, that they need, new hardware, et cetera. And so kind of all those things kind of coming together at the same time, a better relationship model with enterprise, bring them capability to have, commoditizing the stack, open collaboration. I mean, this wasn't Red Hat, it was 200 people back then, but it was the world was developing Linux, and just think of like that shared innovation that went into it. So I was in the right place at the right time, lucky, and hopefully help them execute to the great company that they still are.
I'm so glad you shared the thinking behind the kinds of decisions you were making back then and the observations that you came across, because I think it sets a solid groundwork for sort of the sentiment and the DNA of what Neuromagic is moving, right? And moving forward. And especially when we combine it with, you loved like woodworking, right? So there's this non-digital, non-tech aspect, but still very computational in its craft, right? Of getting something
Creative.
created.
Still get to build stuff. Awesome.
Yeah. And then you just did that digitally and shifted over, right, into the world today, which I believe also positions you and the company and the team to have that sort of spirit of empathy for end users across the board. Because my question I'm about to ask is, do you feel like the definition of enterprise has changed from then to today in modern day in terms of businesses?
That's interesting. That's interesting. I think it has... especially around, I will say just because open source has enabled them to be a participant rather than just somebody that's sold to, right? Like and that was true not just at Red Hat, at Google, as we kind of shifted to more open source technologies, all the things, this kind of modernizes cloud native apps, made them open source. It really allowed at least enterprises that looked at technology as a strategic enabler, it allowed them to participate. And not necessarily just through like joining the development, but they actually were able to be more creative and provide better feedback because it wasn't opaque. And I think, I know we're going to talk about AI today. I don't see why that's any different. I think AI is arguably much more important to them than even an open source operating system was back in the day, right? But man, allowing them to be a participant in that open innovation isn't just going to have better results for them. It's going to bring value back to the ecosystem of generative AI.
Absolutely. And sort of in the spirit of what you just mentioned, moving into that direction with Neuromagic right now. This is, my notes told me that this was started in MIT, and then there's this blank void between then and then you leading the ship. How did this occur? Were you a part of that original founding group? What's the sort of story there?
No, I had moved out to California for when I joined Google in 2014, and I was out there for my first 3 years running product, and then my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and so I didn't want to I wanted to be in New Hampshire, 5 miles away, and so I moved back, stayed with stayed with Google, but worked remotely for a couple of years. But after that, in 2019, I actually felt I felt really good about open source and Red Hat and all these people I had the opportunity to work with and where their careers were headed, and hopefully how I helped them in their next chapter. That I actually had a different plan. When I came back, beyond being helping with the caregiving of my dad, and that was just to have a different chapter. So, and that chapter was going to be repaying some technical debt that I bestowed upon my wife and family over those years when you're really busy building companies, right? We all do it. And so that was in my plan. Still join a couple of boards. So I still wanted to have I still have that part that I have to be involved, just don't have to be involved at 100 hours a week. But then I would go down and work with a couple of the Boston-based VCs every now and then on a Monday, and just fun, like no commitment, help them with diligence, meet new companies, meet new founders. And then I met Nir through that process. And Nir was the MIT professor that's just, I know has really written the book on, multicore computing, the efficiency, and you can't make, and there's a blurred line between software and hardware when you're making systems efficient. And so he's an expert on that. And then later he got into, cognitive and, where AI meets efficient representations on top of hardware. And all that aside, that's cool. It's technology. And I had already started all the AI services at Google. But I fell in love with him because he was just such an interesting person and such a really nice man that I found I love spending time with him. And just, whether we were talking AI or whether we were talking anything else. And so the way the MIT spinouts work is, the founding professor, after a couple of years has to go back and at least teach one class kind of thing. I'm sure there's other details of it so they knew originally Nir would be CEO for 2 years. So they were looking for a CEO right out of the gate. That wasn't going to be me. That was not my plan. But I love spending time, so I committed the day a week, and I'd go down and hang out with them in Somerville and help them. And then COVID hit, and I had been writing code every day, finally using, to be product officer for Google, defining all the products, but never having the time to use them. So I actually had a little thorny problem that I wanted to build for. And so I wrote some stuff on using every Google Cloud service, which was a blast. I mean, music playing, having a great time. And then, but then increasingly I saw that amount of time getting squeezed out, and I was spending more time with Nir and the Neural Magic team, because just the AI side, the open source side of AI was just really getting rocking and rolling. And, a few years ago, and it was just fascinating. And so I just fell in love with the team. I fell in love with learning the technology, how fast it was innovating. And then I really fell in love with what it could be. If open source could really enable these companies the same way it enabled them at the infrastructure level, that'd be really amazing. And if I could help with that in any small way, then yeah, I want to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And if we could dive right into it, what are some use cases that I think maybe aren't as readily apparent in how AI and these models in open source communities could begin to find themselves applied in everyday running of business?
Yeah, I think if we went back pre-November 2022, if we went back before, circa ChatGPT, it was typically in two arenas, right? One was vision, and vision been happening for years. And in most of the cases in vision was either classification, what is that? And that might be true in retail, manufacturing, obviously security, and then also and then with self-driving, object detection, and so vision was pretty robust, and most of the vision use cases were at the edge, meaning you weren't trying to take a picture of something in the data center and figure out what it was. You were doing this out in the real world on devices and cameras, and then the other sort of side of it. And so the other sort of side of AI was typically natural language processing. And then the leading model implementations came out of Google, started the whole transformers model called BERT. And what enterprises typically did with them, companies typically did with them, was offline. So meaning not real time interacting with users, but more, I'm going to summarize this document. I'm going to go look at these customer call logs, and I'm going to do sentiment analysis on, are they mostly happy? And when they're unhappy, what are they unhappy about? What object, what entities? So it was kind of like these offline processing and getting, intelligence out of data, but not in kind of real time. And that's where we were a year ago. 100%. No, that was definitely the 80-20 rule. Like that, those use cases were everything. But even then, like everybody was exploring, all companies were exploring with AI in some form. I'd argue very few had put it in production at any kind of scale or any kind of beyond vision, that had an impact on their business. And then as soon as, ChatGPT, it just changed everything. It changed, use cases changed. They became real time. They became, it was the ushering in of generative at least from the large language model side. As much as we thought Stable Diffusion was amazing, like nobody even talked about it once, ChatGPT was out.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just the notion of like the creativity and the efficiency you could gain through these, generative text use cases was amazing. And I think people saw them really quickly. So it's definitely changed. It's definitely ushered in a greater sense of urgency on behalf of companies to either become more efficient, enable their products, or not get eaten up by AI.
Yeah. And most businesses, because what I want to get to now is something that I think is really interesting that Neuromagic is doing in particular. And that is, and I'm trying to find a way to make this accessible to as many people as possible, right? Because sure, if you're talking to people only in tech and you tell them, hey, we're looking to optimize CPUs to be able to run these models, it's like, sure, and wow, that's amazing, right? You say that anywhere outside of that, and it's like, there's the conundrum. Okay, so does my computer have that? They don't even know if their computer has a CPU half the time, right?
Yeah.
So therein lies the question, because those are the people that we want ultimately to be accessing this type of technology to continue to innovate from the bottom up, right? So therein lies the challenge. And what are some of the things that you've come across as a team to sort of look at, like, here's maybe ways that we can look into that? Because we could dive into, like, what does the optimization process look like? Is it running through a software interface? What's going on? Before we even get there, because those people can be patient and they can wait, have you discussed this problem openly yet, just in terms of like, can we provide this kind of models at an affordable way to car washes to determine whether or not, the car was actually clean after it came out of the car wash? I don't know. I'm just hypothetically thinking out loud here.
Yeah. I think like it's still early, to be honest, because, and like one of the public boards I'm on, runs a lot of like back office businesses that are outsourced, to them. And they're immediately looking at hundreds and hundreds of use cases across everywhere from supply chain issues, managing supply chain, managing, quote to cash, managing, anything that any large enterprise has to deal with. You're seeing large language model use cases fit in. And a lot of it is really around some of the classical cases are obviously the, human to software system interface. Right? It's kind of probably the most natural one that we all think of. It's the way that we interact with ChatGPT as we ask questions. The difference is that I think if you take and that's kind of the chat tailored version of these models, which is great. The difference is that while that capability, if I kind of summarize it today, is really consumer grade, meaning like it definitely probably satisfies 90% of what consumers are looking for. Modulo not being current, like I still want to know the score, like the game, anyway. So in the prediction of are the Patriots gonna like get the top draft pick this year. Like, I don't know. But I think like what we're seeing is the missing part is it's not good enough for companies to have like consumer grade kind of versions of chat models. Like if you're in the medical business, right? Like there's it's not good enough to not have the specificity around the data that's specific to somebody that's in medical insurance, right? And so what happens is these models are created and they're all powerful, but the journey companies are on are two things. One is, what's that use case I want to apply to, and many of those are, like you said, is question and answering, right? Give me an answer to a question. But the step that most companies have to go through is, how do they tailor that model, not recreate a whole new model, but how do they tailor that model to understand them and their business and their data set. And so that's, I'd argue, the like equal amount of innovations going into that right now to making that easy and more accurate, so that it really understands you. So, I mean, would you really want like a call, chat, support line, right? Same model to be used for all businesses? Of course not, right? And you want it to understand your ontology. And so that really brings in like a fine-tuning process that has to happen for all the companies. And then like, I don't, how many of us even use, like when that chat dialogue pops up, you run. Like how quickly can you exit off, right?
Absolutely.
But imagine if it like really understood who you were, like it added your account, it knew where you were, already knew you were having an issue, knew what the issue was about, like it knew you didn't have access. Like all these are the art of the possible if the industry gets away from the one big model is going to serve everybody versus thousands and thousands of smaller, more efficient models that are more fit to task, right? And I think that's where it needs to head. This stage that we're in right now is kind of a demo.
I love this because most people who do seek out and find these alternatives, and I say it in air quotes because they're usually just a front-facing front end that's running the same GPT-4 model through an API or what have you, or one of the other similar models, as opposed to a model that has been, like, as you said, fine-tuned, tailored specifically with all the context, which is the term most people are using these days, for specifically your business. If you were an author, imagine a model that had only all of your books and how it relates with the subject. Like, and it's just purely for you, right? For the health insurance companies, imagine being able to have a tailored model for each customer in their network. This is what we're talking about. The implication, yes?
Yeah. And you can, as much as it took massive amounts of computer infrastructure, millions of dollars of computer infrastructure to build, these open source foundational models. You can fine tune these for a couple $100, right? In small number of hours on small number of GPUs, in the cloud. So it really is, we're not talking about like, so I think that's kind of like the mindset is like, yeah, but like we can't like go build us a multi-million-dollar model.
Right.
What happens is, because then you would be like, well, is the value there to, is the ROI there? Is enough value that ROI is there? So, but as you start to drive the cost down to fine tune these models to where it's near epsilon, then it doesn't, even if you get a little bit of value out of them for certain use case, you're going to go that route. And I think, and it's okay that we're early because it's really the open source equivalents of, the ChatGPT models didn't even start to exist till 9-ish months ago, 8 months ago, right? Like, so it's really, we haven't even been a year yet. And so they're getting better and better, and they'll get more efficient along the way. So it's natural that we don't know how to fine tune them. So what happens instead is, which is kind of ironic, is what the industry's been doing is take this one generic model and try to teach it about yourself every time you ask a question.
Oh my
Which
God.
think about like the burning cycles and processing, like, okay, let's tell it who I am again. Let's tell it who I am again. But
Prompt
the reality,
engineering.
yeah, it's prompt engineering, RAG engineering. They're all fun. And I think they'll always exist, but I think they'll coexist, quite honestly, with a more adapted model that meets a company or individual user's needs.
And the subject matter expertise and people's ability to communicate really does currently determine how much access and use and usefulness someone can get out of this generic model. And that in itself is another obstacle, right? And correct me if this analogy is wrong, because the way I'm hearing it is like people are seeing it as like, oh, can I really have my own model? In the same way where people who develop applications need a really, really powerful computer, but then they can package it into this really small package that works on your phone, even though there's no way you could build that on your phone. Is that sort of the same analogy?
It is, and that's where this is all hidden. We had a proof of concept request, come in yesterday, which is, wanting a large language model on an Android phone. Like, and I'm like, and but in the past though, there was always vision. It was always vision. But now all of a sudden, back to that use case question, people are even seeing this isn't like a consumer application, it's a business application, but the notion of like, Android having like large language models, isn't that kind of like ironic?
Yeah.
But the reality is, no, you actually can do it, like with the right optimizations, because the nature of these, even though the models have exploded to be 100x bigger, 1000x bigger, and that was part of the breakthrough, right? That OpenAI is credited with, is they went a direction that the industry said going in that direction doesn't just mean spending more money. It actually will end up with something that's not good. And they went that direction anyway, and they're right. And so that was pretty clear. But the resultant effect is these models are now 100 to 1,000 times bigger than they were a year ago, right? And so but what I think people don't realize, and that I didn't realize, and so what got me excited to the early MIT kind of technology that fed the company, was that just like the brain, right? Your brain's got petabytes of information, but the power of a cell phone, right? And so, yeah, it's still better than these models are. And so the notion, the comparison, the analogy is that as you get in these large language models that have 7 billion, 70 billion, 700 billion parameters, a very small percentage of them are the ones that really matter, which is kind of funny. So they're all there and they're all trained and modified during the training process. But the trick, and the credit to Nir and the founding team, was they figured out how to reduce the parameters in these large models, right, down to only the ones that mattered. So now, if all of a sudden you can reduce the parameters, and we through sparsity, we turn those parameters to zeros, right? And so that's kind of, but if you can eliminate 90% plus of those parameters in the model, still have the same performance, meaning performance in this case, the accuracy and the capability of the model, you've just all of a sudden not just made it run faster, you've enabled it to run in places that it never could have before. So the realization of running these models on phones and laptops and cameras is not just feasible, it's the future, right? It definitely is a reality. And I think the future will mean like all models will be created this way. Right now, like the industry just creates these heavyweight models and runs them heavyweight on really expensive GPUs. But I think just like with Red Hat and open source, the future will be more efficient hardware to run these things on, whether those are GPUs or CPUs or variants there in between. Why wouldn't you run the most efficient model possible, right? Like, why would you, if it's just as good, right? Like, you just wouldn't do it any other way. You're spending too much money. It's not green, slower. There's every reason in the world why it's wrong. It's just that the capability of sparsity is so early in the industry that so few people understand it. And that's why we've taken the path that we truly are open source and open research and publishing that research and capabilities. So I think down the road, anytime you see a new open source model come out, it'll be sparse by default.
This is kind of the way a lot of people who buy a computer that comes with, let's say, something like Windows, and they have the option and the capacity to install Linux because it's leaner. It makes better use of the
Yeah,
equipment that's on the
yeah,
actual device itself. Whereas Windows or like ChatGPT just has this massive thing that it tries to install when most people don't need like 90% of that, especially for
that's right.
people who are just web surfing or what have you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and please remove my ignorance here. Would those parameters then be the data that's relevant to your specific context, whoever the retail consumer is or enterprise consumer would be, that would increase the parameters, or am I misunderstanding that?
It's actually the weights. So what happens is right now, if you were fine tuning it, say hypothetical, retailer wanted to train it so it really understood their inventory and their produce. They go through a process right now where they would modify basically every parameter. So if it's a 7 billion parameter model, llama model, they would modify every parameter in their fine tuning process. They'd still only do it in a few small number of hours. It's not a large amount of data. So, but they'd still have a unique model with every, what's called weight, every parameter in the model would be changed unnecessarily, right? And so with our technique, where we've already sparsified those models, they would only be modifying the subset of the parameters that were not zeros and get the
Oh,
same result.
wow. And
Yeah,
that's where the
we've
performance
proven
comes
this
in.
out.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
And we've proven this
Ah,
out on prior, on vision and prior versions of NLP, and now we're working towards it on large language models as well. So it makes their training process efficient. And what you'll end up having as we go a level deeper and geek out is that you'll end up with just one common model. You'll end up with one sparse foundational model, call it, Llama 7 billion, right? Which is a great model. And then what's happened is instead of fine tuning those parameters, you'll actually just fine tune a couple of megabytes. And so called adapters. And then you just end up with these small amount, 30, 40 megabyte adapters that are the purpose built fine tuned versions for everything with the big baseline 7 billion parameter model already sparsified being common to all of those. And then you can serve them all up simultaneously because the differences between the fine-tuned models is actually much smaller than people realize it needs to be.
and this is where like consumers could presumably have these on device, no need to be
Oh,
actually access to cloud computing of
and
sorts.
continuously training,
Right.
continuously learning based on your keystrokes, if you so let it to be. So, oh no, running on Macs are easy, running on phones will be easy. And they'll also, because of what we just talked about, adapting, it's not running a big model locally, it's running a small model, a sparse model locally with a fine-tuned adapter. And you can constantly be fine-tuning 30, 40 megabytes on a laptop is tiny, on a phone is tiny. You'll constantly be adapting that based on your persona or your interests or whatever. Right. So think of what search could look like, in this kind of new world.
And what industries are you currently eyeing that you'd love to innovate together with as partners to sort of really prove this out even further and massively take a huge leap for them forward and for their businesses?
Yeah. I'm a I'm kind of an oddity. I think just because I've always been like focused on enterprise infrastructure, that I've always been very horizontal. So it's always around building capability that empowers cross industry. That's been really interesting to me, even if I might gravitate to a particular industry that's more exciting. And I think where computer vision was before in NLP, it was more verticalized. Different companies had bigger problems in certain spaces, but that's changed now. Like that's with the notion of the large language models. We're seeing that, horizontally applied across all industries. I think personally, I'm just more interested in kind of the automation and the safety side. It's just kind of like where I gravitate to. Than help desk and writing poems. It's just me, right? And so I think that's and so so to me, like one of the enablements that we've done is company that's building lane detection software that has to run in real time, for auto safety, and like those are like really interesting things because maybe just because the consumer side of me gets to enjoy them. I still don't hit the self-driving button. I don't have one of those cars, but I still enjoy like anything that makes me more, that eases my ride, if you will. And those kind of systems too. So it's kind of just, that's more of a personal interest than a business interest.
But those kinds of guidance, if you will, are going to become more and more commonplace thanks to these models being everywhere, ubiquitous in
Yeah.
business. So when profit isn't looking a certain way, when one customer is more expensive than the other, all these things will trigger that, hey, get back in the lane, and may even adjust for you. This is what we're talking about
Yeah,
moving
completely.
forward with these models. Accurate?
Well, you know what? Like and I think why in that particular case, why it was a wide neural magic case wasn't because, again, we didn't make the model smarter. The models already knew how to do this thing. We made it easier to deploy on a lower powered device that makes more sense to put in a car, right? Than something that processing the full heavy model that was no more capable required a lot more, processing, memory, power, right? More prone to failure, right? And so like a lot of what this lightening of the capability does is it's, I don't want to overuse the word democratize, but it definitely makes it more accessible to places that, in the past couldn't use it, right? And then that's what makes that horizontal capability to move the entire, all industries forward, because it's low cost enough and it fits everywhere, as opposed to you can use this thing as long as the value is high and as long as you live in these constraints. We really live in a constraint filled world right now with AI, right? And I think that even includes like the complexity of it, right? Like the compete for talent, right? We're seeing it play out, and it's like compete for talent. Like you can only do this thing if you got the smartest people in the world. That'll change, right? Not just the technology gets better, but it's going to be simpler, better understood, easier to deploy. You shouldn't have to be an AI ML person to fine tune a model. Today you do. In the future you won't, right? In the future you'll just be a programmer, not even a programmer, you'll be a Python developer, you'll be a business analyst, right? So that's what I think is really exciting about where this is all going. It does federate it because it drops the skills down and it drops the cost down and makes all the technology ubiquitous through open research and open source.
I love this. If you could sort of put it on a platter or put a bow on this for people, like how could this advancement in the way that you're envisioning it here, with making it more accessible in that way, change the way businesses should think about their investment in AI moving forward as a tech for their business and its applications? Say, like, how should they really be viewing this? If they haven't already gotten the context from our conversation and you had to say
Yeah,
it
yeah.
explicitly, what do they need to hear?
I think the hardest part, actually, as much as I just kind of the way you and I kind of geeked out about it, it sounds like, voodoo. And I just talked about like the technical skills that you need. I don't think that's the hardest part even today. I think the hardest part is just getting people on the applied side. Is really the art of the possible discussion, right? Around what use cases do companies, what use cases, inside the company do you have? You got to own that. You got to own, how you're going to apply it. And it's very much a design thinking, process analysis kind of discussion, right? And I think in many cases, product manager led, kind of art of the possible and use case discovery. And then as you do that, then you take those use cases and you score them down, right, into a smaller set, right? And then you focus on those. But I think the companies that are going to have the most success aren't going to be the ones with the best ML engineers. They're actually going to be the ones that have the best people on the applied side.
Wow. In that case, just opening a little more broadly here in terms of careers that, because it's not always just businesses that are listening, right? Sometimes it's people who will be working for these businesses. What are some careers that people should be paying attention? Because right now everyone's clamoring to readjust and assess their career trajectory, their skilling, their upskilling. Should I still learn programming? Will programming become obsolete? And I feel like no one has the kind of perspective that you currently do because you're in the midst of it all and developing an alternative to many of these things and specifically for what businesses will be using. So I personally feel like you're uniquely qualified to lend weight to this discussion of like what should people consider as careers moving forward as this change begins to continue and this democratization occurs.
Yeah, I think it's I'll to my MIT colleagues, it won't be going back and getting your PhD. Um, so they let me in the room with them. And I think it's actually like just what you and I had just said is like, because that would be the natural step, right? Like you think you got to be like the world's expert. But the reality is, once those people do what they got to do, right, then, that shrinks. Like how many people are building operating systems today? It shrinks. How many people are building infrastructure? It shrinks with cloud. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI. So I think like what I love about where this movement's headed is that there is such a wealth of information out there in the open on on the builders, the people that are building AI applications. And it's all in open source. It's all open source frameworks. It's the Lang chain for managing all like the user interaction and prompt engineering, and so there's all these like rapidly developing capabilities that developers have at their disposal, and you don't have to go to school. Just saying, right? To relearn a new skill because through all the evangelists and the sharing that's out there, it's all written. And so like example by example, like every day I see 10 new blogs that come out, that I just push into a folder and people laughing and say, we have one of those too many tabs open to people. But it's because I really want to get to this thing. But like every time there's like, and the ones that I read is sure there's the research papers that are in a different kind of like browser window. But like the ones I really enjoy are the people, the creatives that are taking the tech that's out there, building something really cool with it, and then sharing with the world how they did it. And that's just this shared innovation at the applied side that I just think builds and builds and builds. And, I think that's a lasting career that will have impact on the companies you work for, as well as just fun, right? And I think in the end of the day, life's pretty short. So pick a fun career and do something that you really enjoy.
What I really loved about the way you said that is I immediately got a vision of you don't have to learn how to build a bridge because once the people who know how to do that built the bridge between over the water, if you will, then what we need are people who know how to create traffic directors
Right?
and whatever artisans to craft and mold more of the design of the actual bridge to be aesthetically pleasing. Those are the things we need. And it's kind of like a startup. You have your core team, and as you scale up to 100 and beyond, you had those people who were just all arounders, and there was a certain grit they had to have of them. But then when you move to the next level, it's not the same people. You actually need specialists or people who just want to be told what to do or what have you. And so that's the kind of context you're saying we should be applying if people are thinking of career changes and what have you. It's like, think of what is going to be happening and how you can position yourself there. And the same thing with businesses, right?
Yeah, I think that's better said than I said it. And I think
I could only say that from listening to you is what I'm trying to say.
But it's not go off and study for 3 years and then get started. It's like get started. It's to get started and continuously learn, and have fun and share along the way, right?
Build in public, if you will, right?
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Well, listen, I mean, you've been so awesome and generous with your information. I want to roll out the red carpet for you. Is there anything you want to invite people to do? Visit, a website, look up something that you've written, a depository you want people to look, or a repository you want people to look at. You want them to join GitHub, whatever. It's all you.
I think, everybody at the company is like super passionate around like what we're building. We're all anxious because we want to go faster. And I think like the best thing for a company like ours, or clearly for people to come and check us out, right? Number of places, all our stuff's out and open source and published in PyPy for easy installs. And we write, DevRel blogs so we can get started and try to make it simpler. But you know what you miss the most? We got a Slack community. It's just I love it when people give feedback and talk. Like, so yeah, come and check us out, but like try it. And more often than not, like you're gonna get a set of insights because we're engineers. And engineers like think they build beautiful, easy to use products, but it's harder to realize. And so if you're kind of that practitioner and you try some of our stack and our tech, or find a bug in how we like describe it in the docs, like we love feedback, and I think that's the best. So if we shared something that's valuable to you, then share something back.
I love that. Just so many things that I'm thinking about now after our discussion. I'm actually reeling. I've got energy more than lost energy, and that's a good sign that I think the listener will truly appreciate what we've been able to discuss here. And that's, we didn't even dive too technical into it because that's the whole point is like the spirit of this conversation is one day it will get easier and easier to the point where you can literally answer, if you will, a type form sort of interface that will modulate your model for you and have it just be that personal, kind of like the movie Her, if you will, right? That's the sort of what we're heading towards. And then in real time using vision and all the other models, right?
I know. And there's two things that I know my engineers will hate it when I say this because they're all working towards their career. But like the industry's even invented new titles. Like we recruit on, we go to our website, we're hiring an ML researcher, we're hiring an ML engineer, we're hiring an ML ops person. So it's ML this, ML that, ML. And it shows you like how unique this stuff is. It's kind of like everything's a snowflake kind of thing, but the reality is it shouldn't be. Like you just want your general IT department to be able to deploy this stuff, just like they deploy, we throw everything in IT, databases, network, like everything they have to run, but ML special, and it has to have whole new categories of job titles around it. And so my goal, to be honest, is to obliterate these unique titles that people have. There shouldn't be an ML engineer. Like, it should just work, right? It should just be plug and play. And right now, though, that's
how early we are.
Yeah, it's early we are. And so I get it. But if it's successful, it'll just be easy table stake stuff. Yeah.
Well, there it is, everyone. Neural Magic, and Brian Stevens and the whole team, they're making it possible. And if you're running a business that this hit home for you and you're looking to try it, I don't know if I have to urge you to do that. I feel like you'd feel compelled just naturally having listened to this discussion. But, Brian, I can't thank you enough for sharing, being so open with me, and really teaching me a lot about where the future is heading as well. I feel very fortunate to have been able to speak to you at this juncture in your neural magic journey. I can't wait to see what you all do.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.